Is the government hiding a client list or anything that the Trump administration could release tonight?
No, there is no client list. There never has been a client list. A client list suggests that Jeffrey Epstein made a list of people to whom he trafficked women. What there is a redacted FBI affidavit from accusers. There are several of them from accusers that accuse that accuse various people of having improper sex. And that has been redacted. The names of the people accused have been blacked out. Now, of course, because I was the lawyer and I did only investigations, I know who all these people are. I could figure out, based on everything that I saw, who Mr. X is, Mr. Y is, and Mr. Z. I can tell you right now, none of them are public figures who are currently in office. Some of them were previously in office. Some of them are dead. But there is no client list. And the redactions could be undone if you go to court. So many of the things that are being suppressed by two judges in Manhattan. And they're doing it largely to protect the alleged accusers who are, in the view of the judges, victims, even though we don't know what their actual status is. But the judges have issued orders, which is why I can't disclose things I'd love to disclose, saying that you can't disclose this information. But Pam Bondi and the Justice Department and Donald Trump are not responsible for that. I don't know of any information that they could disclose that they haven't disclosed. Now, maybe there is some, but I'm simply not aware of it. And so I think it's important to place the blame where the blame deserves to be placed. The vast majority of people who are in the files, and I know them all, I've seen all the names, the vast majority of them have already been disclosed. They're in articles all over the world. They're in books that have been written. So if we got everything, you would be shocked how few names are there that haven't already been disclosed. The media hasn't, by the way, done a good enough job in finding the people who have been disclosed in the public record. So that's that list. Then there's the videotapes. People say there must be sex tapes. I know the whole story there. There is a videotape, maybe several videotapes. They came under the following circumstances. Before any of this happened, Epstein was robbed by one of his employees of money and of a licensed gun, and he called the Palm Beach police, and they installed video cameras, not in the bedrooms, but in the living room. And those video cameras recorded some people, but there's no sexual allegations there. So there's nothing to that. And then there's Tucker Carlson's absurd allegations about the Mossad. There I know it from very, very personal experience. Why? I was representing Jeffrey Epstein. I asked him about everything, including whether he had any contacts with intelligence agencies. If he had, he would have been dying to tell me that, because I could have used that to get him a better deal. If he had worked with the Mossad or the CIA, that would have been golden for me. But of course he said no. And then I checked it with my sources in Israel. Let me clear, I once represented the Mossad. When 5 Israeli Mossad agents were captured in Cyprus, the head of the Mossad asked me to represent them. I did. I got them out, and the Mossad sent me a congratulatory note. I'm friendly with many of the people who have been heads of the Mossad. I'm not going to tell you who my sources are, but I can tell you with absolute certainty he had no connections to Mossad. He only got connected to Israel very late in this, when he met Ehud Barak and he made business dealings with him. But there was no connection to Mossad. The reason that story generated is because his girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, probably did have a connection to Mossad, Robert Maxwell, but it had nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. And as far as the suicide is concerned, of course it was a suicide, but it was a suicide, I believe, assisted by jailers. It was not a suicide that he could have committed alone. I think the jailers had something to do with his cellmate being dismissed, with the cameras being turned off. So there are things that can be hidden, but there's no smoking gun here, and there's no fault on the part of this administration, as far as I can tell.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.